There is something I must tell you before we go any further, dear souls. Something that has been pressing upon me with a great and quiet urgency, the kind that does not shout but simply waits, steady and patient, until the right moment arrives. And that moment is now. If you were born on certain dates, if your life has carried particular patterns, particular longings, particular wounds that never quite healed no matter how many years passed, then what you are about to hear may be the most important thing you have listened to in a very long time. Stay with me. Stay until the very end. Because what I am going to share with you today did not come from books. It did not come from the reasoning of the waking mind. It came from a place much deeper, much older, and much more faithful to the truth of who you really are. I want you to do something for me right now. Before we go one step further, I want you to share this with someone in your life who has been searching, who has been restless, who has looked at the ceiling at 3 a.m. and wondered why they are here and what all of this means. Because what I am about to reveal touches not just the mind and not just the heart, it touches the soul. And the soul, my dear friends, does not forget. Subscribe if you feel moved to do so, because what we build together here in this quiet space of listening is a community of souls who are ready to remember. And leave a comment below, yes, right now if you wish, with your birth date or simply with one word that describes what you have been feeling lately. One word, because in that one word, so much of your journey is already written. Now, let me settle into this truth with you. Know that the date upon which a soul enters this earthly experience is not an accident. Nothing in the universe of divine law is accidental. Not the breath you took this morning. Not the dream you had last week that you cannot quite explain. Not the person who looked at you across a room and made something in you go very still and very awake. None of it is random. None of it is without meaning. And certainly, the moment of your birth, the precise configuration of time and space and cosmic energy into which your soul descended carries with it a signature, a frequency, a set of lessons and gifts and karmic responsibilities that your soul agreed to before it ever put on this body like a coat. As it has been shown to me, in those long hours of rest, when my waking mind stepped aside and something older and wiser spoke through me, the soul chooses its entry point. It selects the conditions of its birth, the way a musician selects a key before beginning a composition. The key does not limit the music. It shapes it. It gives it a home, a starting place, a particular color and resonance. And your birth date, dear souls, is your key. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You are thinking that this sounds like fate, like determinism, like the doors of your life were sealed before you even arrived. But let me tell you, beloved friends, that is precisely what it is not. The reading I gave in those years of my work, the thousands upon thousands of readings, never once pointed toward a soul that was trapped. What they revealed, again and again, was a soul that had forgotten its own freedom, a soul that had forgotten its own power. A soul that was living in the shadow of choices made in other lifetimes, carrying burdens that were not meant to be permanent, suffering in ways that were entirely unnecessary, not because the universe wished it pain, but because the soul had simply forgotten. And that forgetting, dear friends, is what I want to speak about today. That forgetting is what I want to gently, lovingly, persistently undo. Let me tell you something I observed through the course of my work that deeply moved me, that filled me with a kind of reverent awe at the mercy and the patience of the divine. Every single soul who came to me, whether they were born in January or in August, whether their birth date fell on the 1st of a month or the 28th, whether they entered this world in a season of cold or warmth, every single one of them carried within them the exact same fundamental truth. They carried healing. They carried purpose. They carried the seeds of their own awakening, not outside of themselves, not in a remedy I could prescribe or a prophecy I could deliver. Within themselves, always within. The healing forces are within, not without, my dear friends. That is not a pleasant idea for the mind to play with. That is a law, as real as gravity, as faithful as the rising of the sun. But here is what I want to say specifically about your birth date, because this is where it becomes personal. And this is where, if you will stay open, something in you may quietly shift. There are patterns. There are recurring patterns that I observed across thousands of souls. Patterns connected to the time of year in which the soul entered. Patterns connected to the numerological signature of the day. Patterns connected to what I understood through the records as the karmic weight and the karmic gift carried by the soul that chose that moment of arrival. And these patterns are not destiny in the way we fear that word. They are more like tendencies, like the natural inclination of a river to flow in a particular direction. The river can still be redirected. But if you do not know the river's natural direction, you will spend your whole life swimming against it, exhausted, confused, wondering why everything feels so hard. Let me begin with those who were born in the early months of the year. Those who entered this world when the earth itself was still in a kind of wintering, a time of inward turning, a time of root work and deep quiet. January and February souls know this. Your entry into the world came at a moment when the collective consciousness of the earth was in its most reflective phase. And this shaped you. Many of you have carried through your life a deep seriousness, a weight of inner knowing that sometimes isolates you, that makes you feel older than you are, wiser than your years, but somehow unable to translate that wisdom into ease. You often feel as though you arrived carrying something, some memory, some responsibility, some ancient grief that belongs to a story you cannot quite remember. As it has been shown to me through the records, many souls who enter in the early days of January carry with them what I would describe as a leadership burden from previous incarnations. There is often a life, sometimes more than one, in which this soul held great responsibility, made decisions that affected many others, and in some cases carried the weight of having made choices, in full sincerity and with full intention, that nevertheless caused suffering. Not from malice, never from malice, but the soul carries the echo of that responsibility. And so, in this life, the January soul often swings between an almost compulsive need to be in control and a deep fear of responsibility. They want to lead but fear the cost of leading. They want to be seen but fear the scrutiny that comes with being seen. They feel called to something large but cannot quite trust that they are worthy of the calling. To those souls I say, with all the love and steadiness I can bring to this, the weight you carry is not a punishment. It is a preparation. The soul does not return burdened without purpose. It returns burdened because it is ready to transmute, ready to understand at a level it could not reach before. The experience of this lifetime, with all its particular textures of responsibility and doubt and longing, is the exact crucible your soul needs to refine what was left unfinished. And here is what is important for you to understand, that refinement does not require more suffering. It requires consciousness. It requires you to stop sleepwalking through the patterns and begin to choose deliberately, to ask each morning, what am I building today with my mind, my heart, my actions? Because mind is the builder. And whatever you hold in your mind with persistence and with feeling, you are building brick by invisible brick into the substance of your life. Now, let me turn to those born in the late weeks of January and moving through February. There is something particular here that I want to address with great care, because these souls so often dismiss what I am about to say. February souls, and particularly those born in the middle weeks of that month, carry a quality I can only describe as translucence. There is a thinness to the veil for them. They have, in many previous experiences, developed what the records show as a heightened sensitivity to the unseen, to the emotional currents of others, to what lies beneath the surface of things. And in this life, that sensitivity can be both their greatest gift and their most enduring source of pain. How many of you, born in February, have spent your life absorbing other people's emotions as if they were your own? How many of you have walked into a room and immediately felt the tension, the grief, the joy, the longing of every soul present, felt it in your body, carried it home with you, laid awake with it? How many of you have been called too sensitive, too emotional, too intense, and have spent years trying to build walls around that sensitivity, trying to harden into something more manageable, more socially acceptable, and found that every wall you built only made you feel more isolated and more disconnected from the very thing that makes you most alive? Know that your sensitivity is not a flaw to be corrected. It is a faculty to be honored and trained. The souls who come into this world with that translucence, that permeability to the unseen, are not mistakes of nature. They are workers of a particular kind, souls who in previous lives developed the capacity to feel deeply because they were called to serve deeply. Healers, often. Mystics, sometimes. Teachers of the inner life. And in this incarnation, the task is not to eliminate the sensitivity. The task is to develop what I would call spiritual discernment, the ability to feel deeply without being swept away, the ability to perceive what belongs to you and what belongs to another, the ability to be fully present in the river of feeling without drowning in it. Your dreams matter enormously, February souls. Pay attention to them. Dreams are today's answers to tomorrow's questions. I said that many times in my readings, and I meant it with every fiber of what I am. The soul speaks in dreams in ways it cannot in waking life, because in waking life, the noise of the world and the chatter of the reasoning mind drown out the subtler messages. In dreams, the soul's deeper knowing has its chance. Keep a journal, not because journaling is a spiritual fashion, but because the act of writing down what your deeper mind offers is an act of respect toward the intelligence of your own soul. And that intelligence, my dear friends, is vast. Now, those of you born in March, and here I want to speak very gently, because what I observed about March souls is something they rarely hear and deeply need. March is a month of transition, a month that belongs neither fully to winter nor fully to spring, a month of becoming. And the souls who choose to enter in March often carry this quality of transition through their entire lives. They are perpetually becoming, perpetually on the threshold. They begin many things with great passion and energy, and find, somewhere in the middle, that the passion shifts, that the thing they began is no longer quite what they thought it was, or that they have changed in the midst of it, and the fit is no longer quite right. This is not fickleness, though the world may have called it that. This is not lack of commitment, though others may have accused them of it. This is a soul pattern, a deep pattern, rooted in previous experiences of change and upheaval, of having commitments severed by forces outside their control, of having built something only to watch it be taken away. The soul learned in those experiences to hold lightly, and that learning, wise and self-protective in its original context, can in this lifetime become a barrier to depth, to permanence, to the fullness of experience that comes only when you are willing to stay. I think of someone who came to me many years ago, a woman named Helen, born in the 3rd week of March, who had moved 7 times in 12 years, changed careers 3 times, begun 4 significant relationships, and left each of them before they reached their deepest possibility. She was not unhappy in any obvious way. She was pleasant, capable, curious, genuinely warm, but there was something in her eyes when she sat down that I recognized immediately. It was the look of a soul that was always ready to leave, always halfway out the door, not because she wanted to leave, but because some deep part of her believed that leaving was safer than staying, that loss was coming regardless, that it was better to be the one who walked away than the one who was left behind. As it was shown to me in her reading, In a previous incarnation, she had been separated from everyone and everything she loved through circumstances entirely beyond her control. The grief of that loss had never been fully processed by the soul. And so in this life, she had developed an unconscious strategy of preemptive departure. Leave before you can be left. Move before you can be forced to move. Helen wept when I told her this. Not because it was painful to hear, because it was the first time in her life that her pattern had been understood rather than judged. And to all March souls, and truly to all souls who recognize that pattern in themselves, regardless of when they were born, know this. The safety you have been seeking through movement and through keeping your options open, that safety does not exist outside of you. It has never existed outside of you. The only safety that is real, the only stability that cannot be taken away, is the stability of knowing who you are at the level of the soul. When you know that, truly know it, not as a philosophical idea but as a living experience, then you can stay, then you can commit, then you can build something that lasts, not because nothing will change, but because you are no longer afraid of change. Dear souls, I want to pause here, because if you have been listening and you recognize yourself in what I have been describing, in that restlessness, that sensitivity, that ancient weight of responsibility, I want you to do something, not tomorrow, now. Take a moment and write in the comments below one thing that you have been carrying that you know in your deepest self is not yours to carry anymore. Just one thing. This is not a small act. The act of naming what we are ready to release is itself a form of prayer, a form of intention, a form of choosing something new. And if this is speaking to you, please share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because the patterns I am describing, they are not rare. They are everywhere, in every family, in every neighborhood, in every heart that has ever wondered why its life feels the way it feels. Now let us move through the year, because there is much more to say, and I want to speak to as many of you as I can. Those born in April, and particularly in the first half of April, often carry what I would describe as an initiatory energy, Aries energy, the astrologers would say, and they are not wrong, though the truth is larger and more specific than astrology alone can capture. These are souls who have in previous incarnations been first movers, pioneers, those who went ahead of the others into unknown territory, whether literally as explorers or settlers or warriors, or spiritually as those who stepped forward with the truth that the world was not yet ready to receive. And in this life, that initiatory impulse is strong. The April soul wants to begin, to start, to leap forward. They have tremendous courage, often more than they themselves recognize. But they sometimes struggle with what comes after the beginning, with the long middle of things, with the patience required to tend what has been planted before the harvest comes. There is a man I want to tell you about, a man named Joseph, born on April 9th, who came to me with a question about why he could never finish what he started. He had built 3 businesses, each of them genuinely promising, and had sold each one just before it reached its potential. He had written half of a book. He had begun and abandoned a medical degree. He was in his 40s when he came to me, and there was a weariness in him that sat alongside the still burning fire in his eyes. He wanted to know if something was wrong with him. Nothing was wrong with him. The record showed me a soul of extraordinary initiative, a soul that had in multiple lifetimes been the one to strike the first spark, to sound the first note, to open the first door. But in this life, the soul's task was different. The task was completion. Not because beginnings are less valuable than completions. They are not. But because this soul had never, in its long history of experience, seen through the fullness of what it began, and the incompleteness was creating a vibration of dissatisfaction, of always being almost there, that was preventing the soul from the depth of experience it was capable of. I told Joseph that the book he had left half-written was the most important thing he could finish in this lifetime. Not because the world needed his book, though perhaps it did, but because finishing it would be an act of deep healing for his soul. It would be the moment the soul finally proved to itself that it could stay, that it could sustain, that it could see something all the way through to its natural end. He left looking slightly dazed and somewhat unconvinced, and I understand that. These truths do not always land immediately, but I trust that they find their mark in time. April souls, your boldness is a gift. Your willingness to begin, to initiate, to take the first step while others are still deliberating, that is genuinely needed in the world. But know this, the harvest only comes to those who stay through the growing season. You were not born only to plant, you were born to reap as well. And the reaping, the patient, faithful tending of what you have begun, that is the spiritual work of this lifetime for many of you. Now here is something I want to say to everyone, across every birth date, because it applies with equal force regardless of when you entered this world. The law of cause and effect, what the Eastern traditions call karma, and what I always understood as the meeting of self with self, is not a law of punishment. It is a law of learning. Every pattern that shows up in your life, every recurring difficulty, every relationship that follows the same arc, every wound that seems to reopen no matter how many times you think you have healed it, these are not the universe punishing you. They are the universe inviting you to look more deeply, to understand something you have not yet fully understood, to choose differently, more consciously, more lovingly, more wisely. And here is the extraordinary mercy at the heart of this law, my dear friends. It means that nothing is permanent. No pattern is fixed. No wound is final. Because if cause creates effect, then a new cause, a new choice, a new thought, a new act of love or forgiveness or courage creates a new effect. You are not trapped in your history. You are not imprisoned by your past lives or your childhood or your birth date. You are the one who chooses in each moment what cause to set in motion. And mind is the builder. What you hold in your mind, what you dwell upon, what you return to again and again with the weight of your attention and your feeling, you are building into your reality. This is not magic. It is law. Now let me speak to those born in May. May is a month of fullness, of the world in bloom, of life at its most generous and visible. And May souls often carry a profound love of beauty, a deep and almost reverent appreciation for the physical world, for the senses, for the pleasures and textures of embodied life. This is not superficiality. This is, in many cases, a spiritual faculty, the ability to perceive the divine through the material, to find the sacred in the ordinary, to be stopped in one's tracks by the light on water or the smell of rain on earth, and know, in that moment, that something larger and more loving than we can comprehend is at work. But May souls, and I say this with great tenderness, often struggle with attachment. The very love of beauty and richness and sensory experience that is their gift can become a source of suffering when it hardens into attachment, when it becomes not appreciation but clinging, not enjoyment but dependency. The soul that has in previous lives experienced great abundance, great physical beauty, great sensory richness, sometimes enters this life with a deep unconscious fear that the abundance will be taken away. And from that fear, it can cling to things, to people, to experiences, to ways of life, with a grip that eventually squeezes the very vitality out of what it loves. The spiritual invitation for May souls is to practice what I would call appreciative non-attachment, to love fully without gripping, to receive beauty with open hands, to enjoy the richness of the material world while knowing, at the deepest level, that none of it is the source of your joy. The source of your joy, beloved souls, is within, always within. The outer world can be the occasion for joy, but it can never be the source of it. When you know that, truly know it, you can enjoy everything more fully, because you are no longer afraid of losing it. Let me turn now to those born in June, and I want to say something here that may surprise you. June in the language of the soul's journey as I understood it through the records, is often a month of what I would call dual awareness. The soul that enters in June frequently carries a heightened capacity for seeing multiple sides of a question, for holding two seemingly contradictory truths at once, for moving between different worlds or different frameworks of understanding with a fluid ease that others may find baffling or inconsistent, but that is, in fact, a form of intelligence, a form of spiritual sophistication. These are souls who have lived many different kinds of lives, many different roles, many different traditions and belief systems, and the breadth of that experience has given them a particular kind of wisdom, the wisdom of context, the understanding that truth is larger than any single framework, that the divine cannot be contained in any one box or tradition or set of rules, that love expresses itself in many forms, and that those forms are all, at their root, the same. But the shadow of this gift, dear June souls, is that you can sometimes scatter your energy across too many interests, too many identities, too many relationships, too many half-followed paths. You can become so fascinated by the multiplicity of things that you never quite settle into the depth of any one thing. And depth is where transformation lives. Depth is where the real work happens. Breadth of experience is a treasure, but at some point, the soul must choose, must dive, must commit to going all the way down into one thing, one path, one relationship, one truth, in order to discover what lies at the very bottom of it. For June souls, the spiritual challenge and the spiritual invitation of this lifetime is often integration, the bringing together of all the different threads of experience and knowing into a coherent whole. The discovery of the through line, the single unifying truth that runs through all the diverse experiences and gives them meaning. When a June soul finds that through line, and they always can, the transformation is extraordinary, because then all that breadth of experience becomes the support for a depth of wisdom that very few can match. Now, my dear friends, let me ask you something directly, soul to soul. And I want you to sit with this question for a moment before we continue. What is the one truth about yourself that you have been most afraid to look at? Not the small truths, the everyday awkwardnesses and embarrassments. The big one, the one that lives beneath all the others. The one that, if you were to look at it fully and honestly, would change everything. I ask this not to create discomfort, but because in all my years of readings, in all the thousands of souls who came to me seeking answers, I found consistently, and without exception, that the answer they were looking for was always, always, on the other side of that one thing they were most afraid to see, not beyond it, not around it, through it. Now, let me tell you about those born in July. July souls carry, in my understanding of the records, a deep well of feeling, a capacity for love and devotion and emotional depth that is, quite literally, extraordinary. These are souls who have come, in many cases, from long histories of service, of caring for others, of placing the needs of others before their own, of pouring themselves out in love. And in this life, that capacity for love is still very much present, sometimes almost overwhelming in its intensity. July people love deeply. They feel everything deeply. They are capable of a devotion and a loyalty that the world does not always know how to receive. But here is what I want to say to July souls, with great seriousness. In many of your previous experiences, this gift of love and service was given in conditions of need, of scarcity, of emergency. You learned to give love in response to suffering, to need, to crisis. And so, in this life, there can be a deep, unconscious pattern of attracting or creating conditions of need as a context for the expression of love. Not from any dark or manipulative intention, but because the soul learned that love comes out in crisis, that love is most vivid when someone needs saving, And so without realizing it, you may have spent your life gravitating toward people who need saving, toward relationships in which you are the caregiver, the rescuer, the one who holds everything together, because that is where your love knows how to go. The invitation for July souls is to discover that love does not require suffering to be real, that you can pour out that magnificent capacity for devotion in conditions of joy and ease, as well as in conditions of need, that you are allowed to be loved back, to receive, to be the one who is held and cared for sometimes, without that diminishing your worth or your purpose. This is often profoundly difficult for July souls to accept. The idea of simply being loved, without any crisis to justify it, without any need to fulfill, can feel almost unsettling. But it is, I want to tell you, the healing that this life is offering you. God is love, my dear friends. That is the simplest and the most complete thing I ever knew with certainty. And love that is real does not require pain as its precondition. Love is the nature of existence itself, not a reward for suffering, but the very substance of what is. When you allow yourself to be loved, you are not taking from the universe. You are completing a circuit. You are allowing the love that you are to flow both ways. And in that completion, something in the soul finally, fully exhales. Let me speak now to those born in August. August is the height of the summer, the peak of warmth and light. And August souls often come in with an extraordinary radiance. There is a natural warmth, a generosity, a quality of personal magnetism that draws others to them. August people often find themselves in positions of influence without particularly seeking them. People are simply drawn to them, follow their lead, look to them for direction and inspiration. And August souls often carry this influence graciously and with genuine goodwill. But the spiritual challenge that I observed again and again in August souls, the one that runs like a thread through the reading of the records, is the challenge of pride. And I want to be very careful here about what I mean by that, because pride is a word that has many layers. I do not mean arrogance in its obvious, unpleasant form. What I mean is a more subtle thing, a kind of attachment to one's own specialness, one's own rightness, one's own light, that can make it difficult to truly receive correction, to acknowledge limitation, to sit in the humble uncertainty of not knowing. August souls sometimes struggle to say, I was wrong. Sometimes struggle to receive help, to admit vulnerability, to be in a position of needing rather than giving. Because there is in many of them an old and deep identification with strength and radiance and leadership that makes the experience of weakness feel like a kind of death. And yet, my dear friends, it is precisely in those moments of acknowledged weakness, of genuine humility, of saying, I do not know and I need help, that the deepest spiritual growth becomes possible. Because it is in those moments that the ego steps aside enough for the real self, the soul self, to speak. I have seen August souls transform in moments of profound humility in ways that took my breath away. The transformation that comes when a naturally strong person genuinely surrenders, genuinely admits need, genuinely opens to being taught rather than teaching, is one of the most beautiful things I ever witnessed through the readings. And I want August souls to know that that surrender does not diminish your light. It deepens it. It purifies it. It makes of your natural radiance something truly sacred rather than something merely impressive. Now, dear friends, I want to take a moment to speak about something that applies to all of us, regardless of birth month, regardless of birth year, regardless of where we come from, or what we have done, or what has been done to us. I want to speak about the nature of the soul itself, because I believe that much of the suffering I observed through all those years of readings, through all those thousands of people who came to me with their pain and their confusion and their desperate longing for clarity, much of that suffering came from a single root cause. And that root cause was this: they had forgotten what they were. They had come to believe, at some level they could not quite name, that they were their bodies, that they were their circumstances, that they were their histories, that they were their failures, or their wounds, or their diagnoses, or their losses. They had forgotten, in the deepest and most practical sense of the word forgotten, that they were souls, eternal, purposeful, beloved, inherently whole, carrying within them not only the wisdom of their current lifetime, but the accumulated experience and learning of hundreds of lifetimes, of striving and loving and suffering and growing toward the light. And from that forgetting, everything else followed. The sense of purposelessness, the sense of isolation, the chronic anxiety that could not be explained away, the feeling of being somehow wrong, somehow broken, somehow not quite enough. None of it, not 1 ounce of it, was the truth. It was all, every bit of it, the symptom of the soul's amnesia, of the soul having fallen asleep to its own nature. Now, I want to speak to those of you born in September. September is a month of harvest and of discernment. It sits at the turning of the year, when the long light of summer begins its gentle retreat, and the world takes stock of what has been grown, what has been cultivated, what has ripened, and what has not. And September souls carry this quality of discernment very strongly. They are natural analysts, natural questioners. They have a deep, sometimes relentless need to understand, to examine, to take things apart and see how they work, to evaluate and assess and determine what is true and what is not. This is a magnificent faculty. The world needs clear minds, precise thinkers, careful observers. And September souls often bring this quality to bear in genuinely valuable ways, professionally and personally. But the challenge, and here is what I observed in reading after reading of September souls, is that this powerful faculty of discernment can turn inward and become self-criticism of a particularly brutal kind. The same analytical precision that September souls bring to understanding the world, they very often turn upon themselves with a harshness that would horrify them if they saw another person applying it to themselves. There was a young woman, her name was Clara, born on September 14th, who came to me in a state of what I can only describe as quiet despair. She was highly educated, professionally successful by any external measure, deeply thoughtful and genuinely kind. But she had spent the better part of 2 decades in a running internal commentary on her own inadequacy. Every decision she made was subjected to an exhaustive review that never quite reached the verdict of good enough. Every relationship she was in was examined so relentlessly for flaws and problems that the joy was regularly dismantled before it could fully form. She was not sad exactly. She was simply never at peace, never able to rest in herself. The records showed me, with great clarity, that Clara carried from previous incarnations a very strong development of the discerning faculty, an ability to perceive clearly and accurately that had served her well in lives where such perception was essential to survival or to service. But in this life, that faculty had not yet been balanced by its necessary counterpart, which is compassion. Self-compassion in particular, the willingness to turn toward oneself with the same gentle understanding that Clara naturally, easily offered to others. She could see the struggles of others and feel only warmth and generosity toward them, but toward herself only the cold eye of the examiner. To September souls, I say this: the discernment you carry is a gift of enormous value, but it is not whole without love. And the love must begin with yourself, not the sentimental, performative self-love of popular culture, but the real, steady, practical choice to apply to yourself the same grace that you would apply to anyone else you cared about. To say, I am doing the best I can with what I understand at this moment, and that is enough. To say, I have been wrong before, and I will be wrong again. And that is part of being a growing, learning, evolving soul. and there is nothing shameful in that. Know that the divine does not look upon its children with the harsh eye of a critic. It looks with the patient, overflowing love of a creator who understands exactly what it costs to be human. For those born in October, I want to speak about relationship, because October souls, in my experience through the records, often have their deepest learning, their most important growth, and their most persistent challenges concentrated specifically in the arena of relationship. Not just romantic relationship, though that is often part of it, but relationship in the broadest sense, the relationship between self and others, between individual and community, between giving and receiving, between independence and belonging. October souls are often extraordinarily sensitive to the dynamics of relationship. They can read a room. They can sense when something is off between people. They have a natural gift for understanding others' perspectives, for finding the middle ground, for building bridges across differences. These are beautiful qualities, genuinely needed in a world that can be harsh and divisive. But the shadow of this gift is that October souls can sometimes lose themselves in the project of maintaining harmony. They can suppress their own needs and preferences and feelings in order to keep the peace, in order to avoid conflict, in order to make sure everyone else is comfortable, and do this so habitually and so unconsciously that they lose track of who they are beneath all the accommodating. If you are born in October and you recognize this pattern, here is what I want you to understand. The harmony you seek outside of yourself, the harmony between you and the other people in your life, that harmony can only be real when it begins inside of you. When you are in genuine harmony with yourself, when your inner life and your outer life are in alignment, when you know what you feel and what you need and are willing to honor those things as fully as you honor what others feel and need, then the harmony in your relationships becomes real and sustainable. But when harmony is purchased at the price of your own truth, it is not harmony at all. It is performance, and performance is exhausting, and it eventually collapses. The soul does not come into this world to perform. It comes to express, to be fully what it is. And being fully what you are, dear October souls, is not selfish. It is the deepest act of love you can offer, because it gives others a real person to be in relationship with, rather than a carefully managed reflection of what you imagine they want to see. Now, let me speak about something that came through in many of my readings across many different birth months, and I want to say it very plainly, because it is important. Dreams. The life of dreams. The messages that come in the night. I cannot tell you how many people came to me with urgent questions about their health, their relationships, their purpose, their decisions, who already had the answers waiting for them in the dreams they were having and had not paid attention to. Dreams are today's answers to tomorrow's questions. That is not a poetic metaphor. It is a literal description of how the soul communicates with the waking self. In the sleep state, the conscious mind, with all its noise and fear and habit and limitation, steps aside. And in that stepping aside, the soul has a chance to speak in its own language, a language of image and symbol, and feeling that, when understood, carries information of extraordinary precision and relevance. I have seen dreams point people toward illnesses that had not yet manifested symptomatically. I have seen dreams reveal the root cause of relationships that had seemed inexplicably troubled. I have seen dreams show people the next step on their path with a clarity that no amount of waking analysis could have produced. Begin tonight if you can, my dear friends. Place a journal beside your bed. Before you sleep, ask a question, not a vague general question, but a specific one. What do I need to understand about this situation? What is the next right step for me to take? What is the source of this feeling that I cannot seem to shake? Ask it with genuine openness, not demanding an answer, but genuinely inviting one. And in the morning, before you do anything else, before you look at your telephone or speak to anyone or allow the day to begin in its usual rush, Write down everything you remember from the night. Every image, every feeling, every fragment, no matter how strange or disconnected it seems, because meaning lives in those fragments. And the act of attending to them, the act of saying to your own soul, I am listening, I take you seriously, I honor what you bring to me, that act itself opens something. It begins a conversation that can, over time, illuminate everything. Now to those born in November, I want to speak carefully here, because November souls carry something that the world often misunderstands, and that can cause them significant suffering if it is not understood correctly. November is a month of depth and of shadow, a month when the world turns more fully toward darkness, when the veil between the seen and the unseen is traditionally considered thinnest. And November souls carry this quality of depth almost constitutionally. They are not afraid of darkness the way many other souls are. They are drawn to it, not because they are dark themselves, but because they know instinctively that there is something important in the dark, something true, something that the bright daylight world tends to cover over and ignore. November souls are the ones who ask the questions that make other people uncomfortable at dinner parties. Who is God really? What happens when we die? Why is there evil in a world created by love? What is the meaning of suffering? These are not morbid questions. They are the most important questions a soul can ask. And November souls are often constitutionally unable to be satisfied with shallow answers, with comfortable platitudes, with beliefs held out of habit or social convention rather than genuine inner conviction. This depth can make November souls seem intense, even difficult to those who prefer their spiritual waters shallower. But it is also what makes them capable of extraordinary transformation and extraordinary wisdom, because they are willing to go where others will not go, to look where others will not look, to descend into the depths of experience and meaning without requiring a flashlight and a guaranteed exit. The challenge for November souls is twofold. First, they must be careful not to become so comfortable in the depths that they lose the connection to the surface, to joy, to lightness, to the simple pleasures of embodied life. The soul that goes deep and never comes back up for air eventually suffocates. Depth requires its complement of height. Shadow requires its complement of light. And the wisdom that comes from genuine darkness is only complete when it is brought back up and offered in service to the living world. Second, November souls must be vigilant about the difference between depth and despair, because the two can look very similar from the inside. True depth is generative. It produces understanding, compassion, wisdom, the capacity to hold others in their darkness because you have been in your own and know it is survivable. Despair is different. Despair clauses. Despair loops. Despair mistakes the dark for the whole of reality and forgets that the light is still there. Steady and patient, waiting. When you feel yourself moving from depth into despair, November soul, that is the moment to reach out. To a trusted friend, to a practice of prayer or meditation, to the beauty of the natural world, to any of the 1,000 forms in which the divine has arranged for its love to reach you, because it has arranged for them. It always has. And to those born in December, the last month of the year, the month of endings and beginnings held in a single breath, I want to say something that I hope will feel like the coming home it is meant to be. December souls often carry a quality of longing that is different from the longing of other months. It is a specifically spiritual longing, a deep, sometimes aching awareness of a home that is not this world, a sense of being a traveler, a pilgrim, someone who is here and belongs here and loves it here, and yet who knows at some level that this is not the final destination, that there is something more, something beyond, something toward which the whole journey of the soul is moving. This longing can be a source of great beauty and great pain in equal measure. Beautiful because it keeps December souls oriented toward the transcendent, prevents them from becoming too comfortable in the material world, keeps the question of ultimate meaning alive in their hearts. Painful because it can make them feel perpetually displaced, perpetually between worlds, never quite fully at home anywhere. What I want to say to December souls, with all the love I can bring to it, is that the home you are longing for is not a place you are traveling toward. It is something you are traveling within. It is the nature of your own soul, and the soul is always home, wherever the body happens to be, because the soul is itself the expression of the divine, and the divine is not somewhere else. The divine is the very ground of your existence. When you settle into that truth, not as an idea but as a lived experience, the longing does not disappear. It transforms. It becomes not an ache, but a kind of joy. A sweet awareness of the largeness and the mystery and the beauty of what you are part of. And in that awareness, you are home. Now, dear friends, beloved souls, I want to take some time to speak about something that cut across all the birth months and all the life patterns and all the individual stories. Something that I believe, with everything I am, is the most important truth I ever brought through from those deep places of inner knowing. And it is this: you are loved, not for what you do, not for what you achieve, not for how successfully you fulfill your purpose, or how perfectly you walk your spiritual path, or how brilliantly you apply the principles I have been sharing. You are loved in your confusion. You are loved in your failure. You are loved when you repeat the same mistake for the 100th time and sit in its wreckage wondering why you cannot seem to learn. You are loved in your worst moments, and your most embarrassing moments, and your most frightened moments. And here is why this matters practically, not just as a comfort, but as a tool. Because the soul cannot truly open to its purpose, cannot truly access its deepest wisdom, cannot truly engage with the healing forces that are within it, while it is operating from a foundation of felt unworthiness, fear and shame, and the deep quiet conviction that one is fundamentally not enough. These are not merely emotional problems. They are spiritual blockages. They interfere with the natural flow of the life force that the divine has established within every soul. They are like stones in a stream, not stopping the water entirely, but redirecting it, diffusing it, preventing it from running clear and strong and true. When you truly feel, in the core of yourself, that you are unconditionally and completely loved, something opens, something that has been contracted and guarded and carefully protected begins to relax. And in that relaxing, the healing forces that are within you, always within you, have room to move. The wisdom that your soul carries begins to flow more freely toward the surface of your conscious life. The purpose that you came here to fulfill becomes more visible, more accessible, more compelling. This is not a distant spiritual achievement. It is available to you now. It begins with the simple, radical choice to try on the possibility that you are loved. Not because you have earned it, not because you deserve it in any competitive, comparative sense, but because love is the nature of the divine, and you are the divine's expression, not its mistake, not its disappointment, not its unfinished project, its expression, its beloved and purposeful expression. Let me speak now about the numbers themselves, because I know many of you came here wanting to know specifically about your birth date in terms of its numerical significance. And while I want to be careful not to reduce the richness of what I have been saying to a simple formula, because the soul is never simple and its journey is never a formula, there is nevertheless real wisdom in the numerological principles that have been part of the mystical understanding of many traditions. Know that the numbers in your birth date are not arbitrary. The date, the month, the year of your birth form a pattern that carries meaning, a kind of spiritual signature, a set of vibrational frequencies that influence, though they do not determine, the character of your soul's experience in this lifetime. The number 1, for those whose birth date reduces to it, carries the energy of initiation, of leadership, of the pioneer. And with it comes the challenge of the ego, the shadow of the leader, which is the temptation to assert one's will over the will of others, to mistake personal vision for universal truth, to confuse strength with dominance. The number 2 carries the energy of relationship, of cooperation, of sensitivity and balance. And with it comes the challenge of the peacemaker, which is the difficulty of maintaining one's own center in the midst of attending to everyone else's. The risk of losing the self in the service of harmony. The number 3 is creativity and expression and the joy of life, and its challenge is the scattering of gifts across too many channels, the temptation of the surface glitter of things rather than the depth. The number 4 is the builder, the foundation layer, the patient, methodical soul who understands that real structures take time. Its challenge is rigidity, the resistance to change that can crystallize patience into stubbornness and order into control. The number 5 is freedom and adventure and the love of experience in all its variety. Its challenge is restlessness, the inability to stay, the confusion of motion with progress. The number 6 is love and responsibility, and the impulse toward healing and service. Its challenge is self-sacrifice that tips into self-neglect, the tendency to pour out for others while the self runs dry. The number 7 is the seeker, the mystic, the one who must go inward, must find the truth within rather than without. Its challenge is isolation, the retreat from life that mistakes solitude for wisdom. The number 8 is power and material mastery, and the ability to move in the world with effectiveness and authority. Its challenge is the confusion of having with being, the soul that mistakes its achievements for its worth. The number 9 is the humanitarian, the one who carries the wisdom of accumulated experience and is called to offer it in service to all. Its challenge is the difficulty of letting go, of releasing what has been learned and loved in previous cycles in order to be fully available for the new. And here is what I want to say about all of these numbers, about all of these patterns and tendencies and energies. None of them are imprisonments. None of them are fates to be suffered. They are all invitations. They are all the universe saying, here is where your growth lives in this lifetime. Here is the territory that your soul needs to explore, to understand, to master, not in the sense of conquering it, but in the sense of integrating it, in the sense of making it conscious, rather than leaving it in the dark, where it drives you without your knowing it. And as you come to understand your own pattern, your own birth date's particular invitation, the invitation is always the same at its root. Grow, choose more lovingly. Think more clearly, act more consciously, forgive more completely, open more fully, love more bravely. These are not tasks to be completed once. They are practices to be lived every day, in every ordinary moment, in every conversation and every decision and every quiet moment of reflection. And in the living of them, the soul fulfills its purpose, not dramatically, not in some grand final moment of arrival, but in the accumulated grace of thousands of small, conscious, loving choices. Now, dear friends, I feel it is important to speak for a moment about the role of forgiveness in all of this, because I have touched on karma and cause and effect and the patterns of the soul across multiple lifetimes, and I want to be very clear about something. The law of karma is not a law of vengeance. It is a law of education. And the primary tool by which its educational purpose is fulfilled is forgiveness. Not because forgiveness excuses what was done, not because it pretends that harm was not harm, but because the soul that is unable to forgive is a soul that is chained to the past, a soul that is pouring its present energy into holding open a wound that the divine has already provided the healing for. I said in many of my readings that the most destructive force in human experience is not hatred or greed or fear, though these are formidable. The most destructive force is the nursing of grudges, the holding of resentment, the choice to remain in the role of the one who was wronged, not because the wrong was not real, not because the pain was not genuine, But because the soul that nurses that resentment is using its life force, its precious, limited, sacred life force, to keep something dead alive, and every unit of energy that goes into keeping the wound open and the grievance alive is a unit of energy that is not available for love, for growth, for purpose, for joy. Forgiveness is not a feeling. I want to be very clear about this. It is a choice. It is a decision that the soul makes, often many times before it takes full root, to stop requiring the past to be different than it was, to stop requiring the other person to be different than they were, to accept the reality of what happened, and then, gently and with great courage, to release the claim you have on it as the defining story of your life, to say, "This happened. It hurt. It was real, and I am more than it. My soul is larger than this wound. My purpose is not contained by this injustice. I am free to move forward, and I choose to." That choice, made with genuine intention, begins a process of healing in the soul that nothing else can initiate, because the healing forces are within, not without. And unforgiveness, held long enough, becomes a barrier not just to the healing of the spirit, but, as I observed in many readings, to the healing of the body as well. The body holds what the soul refuses to release, and the soul's release of what it has been clutching, the opening of the hand, the letting go, allows the body to follow. Now here is something I want to share that came through very clearly in a particular reading, one that has stayed with me because of what it revealed about the interconnection of things. A man, whose name was George, a farmer from the Midwest, came to me not with a spiritual question, but with a very practical one. His crops had failed 2 years in a row. His land, which his family had farmed for 3 generations, was not producing. He wanted to know what to do about his soil. He had tried everything the agricultural experts of the time could suggest. Nothing was working. As I went into that place of inner listening and open to what the records might show, I found myself seeing not soil chemistry or weather patterns, but the condition of George's inner life. I saw, as clearly as I ever saw anything in those readings, a man who was consumed by bitterness toward his brother, with whom he had had a falling out over their father's estate some years before. The bitterness was old, and it was deep, and it had become over the years the emotional atmosphere in which George lived. And what I was shown in that reading was that the condition of his inner life and the condition of his land were not unrelated, that the consciousness of the caretaker influences the nature of what he cares for. That mind is the builder not just in obvious psychological ways, but in the most practical, physical, material ways imaginable. I told George this. I told him gently and as plainly as I could that the restoration of his land would follow the restoration of his relationship with his brother. He did not believe me initially. He was a practical man, a man of soil and weather and tools, but something in him heard it. And some months later, I received a letter telling me that he had gone to see his brother, that they had talked, that some of what had been broken between them was being mended, and that his crop that year, for the first time in 3 seasons, had been abundant. I tell you this story not to suggest that all agricultural difficulties have spiritual roots, though the principle is a real one, but to say this: the idea that our inner life is separate from the outer world, that what happens in our hearts and minds has no effect on the material circumstances of our existence, is one of the most costly mistakes a soul can make. We are embedded in the world. We are participants in it. Our consciousness is not a spectator but an actor, a creative force operating always, whether we intend it or not. And when we begin to take responsibility for that, when we begin to choose deliberately what we allow to live in our minds and our hearts, the whole of our experience begins to shift. Mind is the builder, and you are the mind that is doing the building. Every thought that you allow to take up residence in your awareness, every feeling that you nurse, every conviction that you hold about yourself and about the world, is a brick in the structure of your life. Not one of them is neutral. Not one of them fails to create. The question is only whether you are building consciously or unconsciously, with intention or by default, toward what you truly desire or away from it. Now, my dear friends, I want to speak about purpose, because I know that many of you listening today carry a longing around this question that is almost like a wound. The question of why you are here, what you are for, what the unique contribution of your particular soul's presence in this particular moment of history actually is. And I want to speak to that longing with honesty and with care, because I have seen both the beauty of what happens when souls find their purpose and the pain of what happens when they miss it, not through any dramatic failure, but through the slow, quiet erosion of choosing safety over calling, habit over transformation, the known over the beckoning unknown. Know that every soul has a purpose, not a vague, general purpose like be good or learn to love, though those are real and important. A specific purpose, a particular contribution that only this soul, with its unique combination of gifts and experiences and karmic history and natural inclinations, is equipped to make. And that purpose, that calling, is already present within you. It is not something you need to create from scratch or earn through extraordinary achievement. It is something you need to remember, something you need to clear away the clutter to find. Because the clutter of busyness and fear and other people's expectations and the story of who you have been told you are can bury the calling quite effectively, but it cannot extinguish it. It is still there, patiently waiting. How do you find it? This is the question I was asked in many forms, in many different readings, and the answers were as varied as the souls who asked them. But there were certain principles that came through consistently. First, follow what genuinely moves you, not what you think you should be moved by, not what moves other people who you admire, but what actually, in your own experience, makes you feel most alive. What makes time stop and self-consciousness dissolve? What makes you feel, in the doing of it, that you are exactly where you are supposed to be? That is not always dramatic. It is not always what the world would call glamorous or spiritually impressive. Sometimes it is very quiet. Sometimes it is something that the world would not recognize as purposeful at all. But the feeling of rightness, of alignment, of being fully yourself in the doing of it, that feeling is the soul's signal that you are close. Second, look at what you cannot stop thinking about. What questions return to you, regardless of how many times you try to set them aside? What areas of life, or human experience, or natural phenomena, or creative work draw your attention back to them again and again without your choosing it? The soul's preoccupations are not random. They are pointers. Third, pay attention to what has caused you the greatest suffering in your life. Because often, and this was something that came through in reading after reading, the area of greatest personal suffering is the area from which the soul's deepest service will eventually flow. The one who is healed from deep grief becomes the one who can truly accompany others in grief. The one who has walked through addiction becomes the one who can reach those still in its grip in ways that no one else can. The one who has rebuilt a life from apparent ruin becomes the one who can hold up a light for others who stand in their own ruins and cannot yet see a way forward. Your wounds are not irrelevant to your purpose. They are, very often, the precise shape of it. Now let me say something that I feel deeply, from the center of everything I know. You do not have to have everything figured out before you begin. You do not have to be healed before you can help. You do not have to be certain before you can move. The soul grows by doing. The healing forces within you are not waiting for you to be perfect before they flow. They are flowing right now, in this moment, as you listen, as you open, as you allow something true to enter. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step, and the first step is simply the willingness to move at all. To say, I am open, I am willing to know, I am ready to see what I have been afraid to look at. I am ready to remember what I have forgotten. I am ready to become who I actually am. That willingness, dear souls, is everything. With it, all the healing forces of the universe, all the accumulated wisdom of your own soul, all the love that the divine has been waiting patiently to pour into your life, all of it rushes in. Without it, none of it can find an entrance. Because you are the one who opens the door. The divine knocks, but you must open. Now, for those of you who have been with me through this entire journey, through everything we have explored together today, I want to leave you with something. Not a formula, not a system, not a set of instructions to follow. Something simpler and more important than any of those things. I want to leave you with a question to live with. A question to carry in your heart and let steep there, quietly, patiently, the way good tea steeps, releasing its depth slowly into the water. The question is this: if you fully believed, in every cell of your body and every corner of your soul, that you were loved completely and purposefully by a universe that intended your flourishing, what would you do differently tomorrow? Not eventually, tomorrow. Sit with that. Let it work on you. Because the answer to that question, whatever it is for you specifically, is your next step. It is the beginning of the life your soul came here to live. And you are not too late. You are never too late. The soul is eternal. Its opportunities for growth and love and service do not expire. What has not been done can still be done. What has not been healed can still be healed. What has not been loved can still be loved. And here is what is important for you to understand, perhaps more than anything else I have said today. The love that the divine has for you is not conditional on your spiritual progress. It is not waiting to be fully available to you once you have mastered your karmic lessons or found your purpose or learned to forgive or developed your sensitivity or completed your soul's assignment for this lifetime. It is available now, in full, without qualification, without waiting. That love is the ground you are standing on right now, the air you are breathing right now, the heartbeat that has been faithful to you every single moment of this life without being asked to be. That love is not something you are moving toward. It is something you are moving within. Know that. Carry it. And if something in what you have heard today has shifted something in you, even slightly, even just a small, quiet something, I want to invite you to do 3 things. First, leave a comment below. Tell this community of searching, sincere, beautifully imperfect souls what spoke to you today, what landed, what you are going to take forward with you. Because your words matter, your experience matters, and sharing it creates something, a ripple that reaches further than you know. Second, share this with one person, just one, someone who came to mind as you were listening, someone who is searching, who is hurting in some quiet way, who would benefit from being reminded of what they are and what they carry within them. Because the act of sharing wisdom is itself an act of love, and love is the one thing this world can never have too much of. And third, if you feel moved to continue this journey, to sit with more of these truths, to go more deeply into the landscape of the soul's purpose and the body's healing and the mind's creative power, then let yourself be carried further. This is not a one-time conversation. This is an ongoing relationship with your own depth, and I am honored to be, in some small way, a companion on that path, as it has been shown to me, through all those long hours of inner listening, through all the thousands of souls who brought their questions and their pain and their longing to those quiet moments of reading. The universe is conspiring with infinite patience and infinite love toward your healing, toward your remembering, toward your becoming the full and radiant expression of the soul that you already are, beneath all the forgetting, beneath all the fear, beneath all the patterns and the wounds and the years of sleepwalking. You are already whole. You are already loved. You are already purposeful. and you are already, in every breath, in every heartbeat, in every moment of genuine turning toward the light, already on your way home. God is love, and that love is yours. It has always been yours. Let me tell you, dear souls, it will always be yours. Go gently, go bravely, and know that you are never, not for one moment of all the vast eternity of your soul's journey, alone.